Petrol for the car, like food, was an expense we could not avoid, but my mom could get more mileage out of a tank of petrol than any human who has ever been on a road in the history of automobiles. She knew every trick. Driving around Johannesburg in our rusty old Volkswagen, every time she stopped in traffic, she turned off the car. Then the traffic would start and she turned the car on again. That stop start technology that they use in hybrid cars now, that was my mom. She was a hybrid car before hybrid cars came out. She was the master of coasting. She knew every downhill between work and school and between school and home. She knew exactly where the gradient shifted to put it into neutral. She could time the traffic lights so we could coast through intersections without using the brakes or losing momentum. There were times when we would be in traffic and we had so little money for petrol that I would have to push the car. If we were stuck in gridlock, my mom would turn the car off and it was my job to get out and push it forward 6 inches at a time. People would pitch up and offer to help. Are you stuck? Nope, we're fine. You sure? Yep. Can we help you? Nope. Do you need a tow? And what do you say? The truth? Thanks, but we're just too poor. We're just so poor. My mom makes her kid push the car. Those were some of the most embarrassing moments in my life. All the more so because other kids were coming in on that same road to go to various schools. I'd take my blazer off to so that no one would could tell what school I went to, and I would keep my head down and push the car, hoping no one would recognize me. Chapter 11: Outsider. After finishing primary school at H.A. Jack, I started grade 8 at Sandringham High School. Even after apartheid, most black people still lived in the townships and the areas formerly designated as homelands, where the only available government schools were the broken remnants of the Bantu system. Wealthy white kids, along with a few black people and colored people and Indians who had money or could get scholarships, were holed up in private schools, which were super expensive, but virtually guaranteed entry into university. Sandringham was what we called a Model C school, which meant it was a mix of government and private, similar to charter schools in America. The place was huge, 1,000 kids on sprawling grounds with tennis courts, sports fields, and a swimming pool. Being a Model C school and not a government school, Sandringham drew kids from all over, making it a near perfect microcosm of post apartheid South Africa as a whole. A perfect example of what South Africa has the potential to be. We had rich white kids, a bunch of middle class white kids, and some working class white kids. We had black kids who were newly rich, black kids who were middle class, and black kids from the townships. We had colored kids and Indian kids, and even a handful of Chinese kids, too. The pupils were as integrated as they could be, given that apartheid had just ended. At H.A. Jack, race was broken up into blocks. Sandringham was more like a spectrum. South African schools don't have cafeterias. At Sandringham, we'd buy our lunch at what we call the tuck shop, a little canteen, and then have free reign to go wherever we wanted on the school grounds to eat: the quad, the courtyard, the playground, wherever. Kids would break off and cluster into their cliques and groups. People were still grouped by color in most cases, but you could see how they all blended and shaded into one another. The kids who played soccer were mostly black. The kids who played tennis were mostly white. The kids who played cricket were a mix. The Chinese kids would hang out next to the prefab buildings. The matrix, what South Africans call seniors, would hang out on the quad. The popular pretty girls would hang out over here, and the computer geeks would hang out over there. To the extent that the groupings were racial, it was because of the ways race overlapped class and geography out in the real world. Suburban kids hung out with suburban kids. Township kids hung out with township kids. At break, as the only mixed kid out of 1,000, I faced the same predicament I had on the playground at H.A. Jack. Where was I supposed to go? Even with so many groups to choose from, I wasn't a natural constituent of any particular one. I obviously wasn't Indian or Chinese. The colored kids would give me grief for being too black, so I wasn't welcome there. As always, I was adept enough with the white kids not to get bullied by them, but the white kids were always going shopping, to the movies, on trips, things that required money. We didn't have any money, so I was out of the mix there too. The group I felt the most affinity for was the poor black kids. I hung out with them and got along with them, but most of them took minibuses to school from way out in the townships. They rode to school as friends and went home as friends. So after school, I was on my own. Weekends, I was on my own. Even ever the outsider, I created my own strange little world. I did it out of necessity. I needed a way to fit in. I also needed money, a way to buy the same snacks and do the things that the other kids were doing, which is how I became the tuck shop guy. Two things were true about me at that age. One, I was still the fastest kid in school. And two, I had no pride. The last period before break was assembly, and the second we were dismissed, I would run like crazy to the tuck shop so I could be the first one there. I was always first in line. I became notorious for being that guy, so much so that people started coming up to me in line. Hey, can you buy this for me? Which would annoy the kids behind me because it was basically cutting the line. So people started approaching me during assembly. They'd say, Hey, I've got 10 Rand. If you buy my food for me, I'll give you two. That's when I learned time is money. I realized people would pay me to buy their food because I was willing to run for it. I started telling everyone at assembly, place your orders, give me a list of what you want, give me a percentage of what you're going to spend, and I'll buy your food for you. I was an overnight success. I had so many customers, I was turning kids away. I had a rule. I would take 5 orders a day, high bidders only. I'd make so much that I could buy my lunch using other kids' money and keep the money my mom gave me for pocket cash. Then I could afford to catch a bus home instead of walking or save up to buy whatever. Every day I'd take orders. Assembly would end and I'd make my mad dash and buy everybody's hot dogs and cokes and muffins. If you paid me extra, you could even tell me where you'd be and I'd deliver it for you. I'd found my niche. Since I belonged to no group, I learned to move it seamlessly between groups. I floated. I was a chameleon still, a cultural chameleon. I learned how to blend. I could play sports with the jocks. I could talk computers with the nerds. I could jump in the circle and dance with the township kids. I could tell jokes to any group that was laughing. I wasn't popular, but I wasn't an outcast. I was everywhere with everybody, and at the same time, I was all by myself.